So, who exactly is Astarte? Where does she come from? She may be the daughter of Asherah, right? She's a part of a divine tetrad, the four. And now there's someone called Tehom that we need to figure out who are these people, right? So, welcome back to my channel. My name is Jennifer, and come on in, sit down, relax, okay? Breathe, stop the scroll for a minute. Okay, and I hope you got about 10 minutes. Give me 10 minutes to try to talk to you today, and hopefully you'll learn something. So, this is a continuation of this stream that we have gotten on about the primordial mother goddesses. I started actually long ago, late last year, beginning of this year with Asherah and that deep dive that I actually stumbled up upon when I was seeking the God dog connection. So those videos will be linked if you would like to start from the very beginning. If not, that's fine. You can jump in right here and stay and just go back when you feel like it. Okay. So because last Sunday was Easter, I thought it would be cool to investigate Ishtar, Astarte, Yoster, and Easter to try to make some connections and get some understanding of who are those figures, those deities, those historical deities, who are they? Why does Astarte and Ishtar, why does that sound so much like Easter? And why is Easter about Jesus? Jesus's death and resurrection, but yet it's inundated with rabbits and Easter eggs. What is that all about? Eventually we'll get there, but in last week's video, we were able to make some connections around fertility, spring, the cycle of death and rebirth, right? So each year, what happens is we go through all four seasons. Right after winter, when everything dies, everything is reborn again in the spring, right? Usually Easter is around not too far after the first day of um, spring. It's not too long after that. And actually, Earth Day is always April 22nd, right? And so, what we were able to learn about the goddesses were some of their attributes and their connectivity. Well, after the reading from last week, I started to reflect on this connection because I'm like, how does Jesus get into this? Where does that come from? Okay. And so one of the main things that stood out to me were the fact that Jesus's death is very much focused on him being and going into a tomb and then coming out of that tomb, being reborn in 3 days. And tomb sounds a lot like womb, doesn't it? Right. And so is there an etymological connection between those words, tomb and womb? And then I heard about Tehom. Tehom is an actual historical, some call her, she wasn't really deified, but she was a primordial energy. And so we're going to get into what is a primordial energy and who is Tehom, but she's actually mentioned in the Bible, Tehom. And so I want you to check out the short on my channel. I will do my best to actually insert it here when I upload this recording, but if not, I'll link it. But check out that short. I referenced the verse in Genesis that speaks about Tehom. And the other interesting thing about this is that Tehom was known, her name was Tehom, but she was known as being like a primordial womb where it was water, but these things came out of it. Okay. So things that were being brought into physicality, they came out of these waters. And so I want to take an investigation into Tehom today. And hopefully we'll make some connections. But I think that there is a connection between the tomb, the womb, and Tehom. and who she exactly was. And get this, Tiamat, Tehomet, another name for Tehom was Tehomet. And so when you begin to sound that out and look at that slowly, it connects to Tiamat, Ma'at. And there's Ma'at, the original cosmological divine order that I speak about. So all of this, I feel like, is going to come together. So let's go ahead and dive into the reading. Hopefully you can hang out with me for a little while longer. If you need to come back, save the video. Don't forget to like the video. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Leave a comment. Hey, what about this interests you the most? What keeps you watching? What questions do you have? Because I would love to take your questions into account in my investigations and in my readings. So let's get started. Once again, I like the idea of us starting in a familiar place. So we are going to start with the Great Cosmic Mother. We're going to check her references and her sources and possibly use that for further reading. So hopefully you can see the screen and all as well. So this is chapter 8, and it's called The Sun's Victory Over the Dark Mother. That's the name of this chapter. All right. Sumerian culture can be traced back to circa 5500 BC in the alluvial plains of lower Mesopotamia. Sumerians wrote on clay tablets. Archaeologists have proclaimed that history begins at Sumer. For that reason only, the Sumerians wrote it all down. Their inscribed myths thus qualify as the world's oldest known literature. What does this Sumerian literature record? As Thompson says, the clay tablets reveal the remains of a revolution, a shift from the dominant female gods of the Neolithic village to the organizing and controlling male gods of the literate city. One of these transitional myths gives us the story of a fabulous character who can fairly be called Enki the Prick. Enki was the water god, and the Sumerian word for water also meant semen. In a lavish ode to his indistinguishable phallus, Enki virtually floods the Sumerian plains with semen. Enki is a fun guy. He also inseminates all the Sumerian people, including his own daughters and their daughters. The ancient earth goddess Ninhursag can't take it any longer. We're going to highlight that. We have a new character entering the chat. The ancient earth goddess. Oh, it's not letting me. Let's try that again. Okay, for some reason my highlight isn't working today. All right, let's just keep going. Her daughter Utu also is inseminated by the new ebullient all-father. Ninhursag removes Enki's semen from her daughter and turns it into plants, which Enki eats, of course. Becoming pregnant with his own semen, he gets very sick. Only by crawling into Ninhursag's vagina with her help can he then give birth to 8 goddesses, all named for different parts of his body. This myth is profoundly ambiguous, as Thompson says. It is also grotesquely funny because it is recording in one story the misstride shift of worldview from matriarchy to patriarchy in ancient Sumer. Sumer began as a goddess-oriented agriculture village. It ended as a civilization, which grew not from a city, but from a fortress. The fortified granary. Real life changes slowly, but in a myth, like Enki and the world order, complex changes over time are compressed into simultaneous image. into a simultaneous image showing the proud, all-propagating potency and world-ordering power of the new male regimen, still entangled in and ultimately dependent upon the wisdom and physical capacity of the old order, the earth goddess, to get the job done. The job, of course, is an impossible one, a mythic delusion. To turn the father into a mother, it could only be done, in Sumer anyway, as a kind of slapstick comedy with Enki as all three stooges. But he learns. In later stories, the great goddess Inanna, queen of heaven and mother of 3,000 years of human time, must come humbly to Enki, petitioning him for a place in the new male order. There is nothing for her to do or be. Man has taken over everything. As Enki boasts, Enki perfected greatly that which is woman's tasks. Men had indeed co-opted all women's crafts and improved upon it. And as Enki demonstrated, he's trying hard to do the same with childbirth and motherhood. As Thompson notes, with increased militarization and urbanization through the new male order. Wow, almost said new world order. Through the new male order came a revealing change in the mythic character of the goddess. From all-powerful to open great mother, she becomes a seductive and wily sex goddess. No doubt this is because men were writing the myths, but the mythic shift also reveals the change real women had to undergo. The goddess becomes eroticized for her life. So I want to pause here, and because she keeps referencing this author Thompson, let's go see the name of his work and who he is. Okay, so in this chapter, which is Sun's victory over the Dark Mother, she's referencing Samuel Kramer, the Sumerians, their history, culture, and character, which we actually we saw that reference last week. And this is a Thompson guy, William Irwin Thompson, The Time Falling Bodies Take to Light, Mythology, Sexuality, and the Origins of Culture. Okay, so we may look him up later. The Time Falling Bodies. The time, is that falling? Yeah, falling bodies take to light. Mythology, sexuality, and the origins of culture. All right, and then Thompson actually takes the Enki myth from this guy, Jacobson, and the Treasures of Darkness, a history of Mesopotamian religion. So she is actually referencing three male authors. So, I didn't want to look at this like it was very one-sided, but she is actually referencing male authors. All right, so let's pick up where we left off, and let's see if we can find that. It was over here somewhere. All right, so we'll just start right here. No doubt this is because men were writing the myths, but the mythic shift also reveals the change real women had to undergo. The goddess becomes eroticized for her life. The new male god is armed and arrogant and no longer in awe of her reproductive powers or her cultural creations. To survive. She must seduce and lure and petition him. But still, the humbled Inanna in this story gets nothing from Enki but an impatient brush off. He tells her she has lots to do. She can tend sheep, observe his wars, and twist thread. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, the hero kills the sacred bull of heaven, Inanna's bull. The bull symbolized Earth's fertility, the moon, so many things. The horns surmounting the breasts on the walls of Katal Huyuk, the crescent horn in the uplifted hand of the Venus of Lausel. What does Gilgamesh do with the horns of the sacred bull of heaven? He hangs them up in his room like a hunting trophy. Huh, a decoration for his clubhouse. Now, isn't this reminiscent of today? Um, all those cabins and hunters, why do they want horned animals hanging on their walls? When this old ancient story of Gilgamesh, when he did the same thing. In this act, the old conservative religion of the women is being mocked in a celebration of male ambition. In this act, the old conservative religion of the women is being mocked. So that's what that is about. It's being mocked in a celebration of male ambition. Wow. Whew. Oh my goodness. Okay. The Gilgamesh epic dates from 1600 to 2000 BC. Thompson calls this 4,000-year-old story the very foundation of Western literature. For what we are witnessing here is to set the pattern for all Hebrew and Greek literature to come. Wow. It's the very foundation of Western literature. And what we're witnessing is to set a pattern for the Hebrew and the Greek literature that comes. This new individuating, mocking, arrogantly alienated ego of Gilgamesh, established in defiance of the old religion of the goddess and the earth, becomes in Western religious and secular history the ego of man, mocker of the past, builder of tomorrow. Wow, so they're mocking Inanna's bull when they put it on the wall, when they decapitate the bull and hang it up. It's a mockery. This effort to displace the female seems to be the archetypal foundation for civilization, for mankind has been at it ever since, whether he is challenging Mother Nature and flying away from her in rockets or in changing her on Earth through genetic engineering. Man has not given up in the attempt to take away the mystery of life from the Great Mother and the conservative feminine religion. There were women who fought the patriarchy. Tribes of Amazons in Syria, Thrace, Macedonia, and Africa defended themselves from invasion and fought to preserve the matriarchal religion and culture against the onslaughts of the rising sun god. We know these warrior women through Greek myth. Mostly, one of their last battles was fought on the Greek mainland against Greek male soldiers. The Amazons lost, fighting to the death. Memorials to them were set up all over the Greek countryside, marking each place in Amazon had fallen in battle, and their valor, beauty, and strength were long depicted in Greek art. Even the male sun god warriors praised them as ferocious and fearless fighters. J.J. Bachofin in Myth, Religion, and Mother Right declared that the rise of Father Right began with the wars against the Amazon cultures. Okay, so this is a book here. He also says that after the wars, the surviving Amazonian women settled down, built cities, engaged in agriculture. Their nomadic horse life was over, but they still accomplished great things. From the Nile banks, the shores of the Black Sea, from Central Asia to Italy to West Africa, Amazon names and deeds are interwoven with the historical founding of famous cities. Hera fought at Troy as leader of the Mysian women warrior troops. She goes unmentioned by Homer. And Bachofin's opinion, because she was more beautiful and more interesting than Helen, the star of Troy. Wow. Because what we know of Amazons comes down to us as myth. We have been taught to doubt their actual existence, but myth records the real history of the ancient pre-literate world. Its accuracy is proven when real Troys are dug up at the legendary sites of legendary Troys. Ancient legends tell that the wild horse was first tamed and ridden by Amazons of old Libya, which is now Morocco. The moon goddess is therefore everywhere connected with the horse, the white mare. This is where the nightmare comes from. Oh, wow. Okay. And, uh, and now nightmare means something so, horrific that people, yeah. All right, let's keep going. Moroccan leather was originated by the Amazons, who fashioned it into tall, pliable, dark red boots. Julius Caesar, in his historical memoirs, speaks respectfully of the great queen Semiramis, who ruled Syria and led its Amazon troops into battle. Caesar also notes that Amazons once ruled most of Asia. When Roman troops entered Europe, they were commonly confronted by tribes of both female and male warriors, led by great warrior queens like Boudica of the Britons and Valeda of the Gauls. African Amazon warrior women were still alive and well in 19th century Dahomey, and an elite Amazon corps of 5,000 women was instrumental in winning the independence of African Malawi in 1964. Wow. It wasn't Amazon women alone who wanted to retain the ancient matriarchal cultures. There were men too with a living mother goddess consciousness who did not voluntarily give up the practice of her ways. Death, rebirth, and ecstasy through her being experienced in joyful, fearful, and orgiastic rites are crucial to the psychic balance and health of men as of women. All legends indicate that reciprocally gaiandrous and androgynous nature of female and male relationships in goddess cultures was split apart by force, the force of heavy patriarchal arms and ideology. Okay, so let's pause here because we need to understand. I know what androgynous means, but what does gaiandrous mean? Let's look that up. Having stamens and pistil united in one column. Oh, it means a hermaphrodite. Well, what does androgynous mean then? I thought that's what androgynous means. So androgynous means partly male and partly female in appearance. Oh, of indeterminate sex, having the physical characteristics of both sexes. Okay, well, she uses a slash, but there may be some subtle difference. So I'm going to highlight that to come back. So there was some sort of androgynous nature of female-male relationships in goddess cultures at one point. Here's a Hebrew myth telling how God the Father, okay, separated the originally bisexual twins. God found the male upper waters and the female lower waters locked in a passionate embrace. Let one of you rise, he ordered, and the other fall. But they rose together. Whereupon God asked, why do you rise together? We are inseparable, they answered with one voice. Leave us to our love. God now stretched out his little finger and tore them apart. The upper he lifted up high, the lower he cast down. To punish their defiance, God would have singed them with fire. The divided waters then voiced their agony of loss by blindly rushing towards each other and flooding the mountaintops. But when the lower waters lapped at the very feet of God's throne, he shouted in anger and tramped them or her underneath his feet. Okay, so that's interesting. That's a Hebrew myth. But let's see where that comes from. It comes from this book called up here. Oh, okay. Robert Graves and Raphael Patel. We know him because this is the author of the Hebrew Goddess. So he wrote another book with this guy called Hebrew Myths, the Book of Genesis. Okay, so that might be worth looking at some other time. We can't read all the books, right? All right, let's keep going. And so the war god Yahweh came to power. When the official Genesis of the Hebrew Bible was written, the ancient goddess was described in negative abstractions. Chaos, darkness, the deep. Tehom, Tehom et, Tehom, the mother of all, is biblically defined as mud, the swamp, some mindless beast of matter who must be kept under paranoid patriarchal control and always subject to the Father's logos or word, right? Because the word, the Father's logos, the word, when he spoke the word into existence, he was speaking over the swamp, the darkness that was Tehom. Tehom, the abyss, the dark night, the lower waters, has always since crouched submissively in her deep abode like a huge beast, sending up springs to those who deserve them and nourishing the tree roots. Though she thus influences human fate, none may visit her recesses. So now we're getting into what happened. It's been told in a mythic-like way, and hopefully we'll begin to make more sense out of it. But there was something that existed that, okay, so if we go back here, all legends indicate that the reciprocally androgynous nature of male-female relationships in goddess cultures was split apart by force. So there was some sort of androgynous nature to things. And then there was a splitting apart. And so this myth describes what happens when that splitting apart comes about and what the lower waters became. And so what we've been reading and learning about is basically what this author refers to as pre-literate history, I believe she called it, but definitely pre-biblical history. So have you ever thought to, have you ever sat down to think about if something existed before the Bible's Genesis begins to tell us history? What was going on? Was this really the very absolute beginning of human beings, right? Or um, our history as beings? Was that the very beginning? Was there a whole nother world? Were things already happening? And then this power comes in and starts changing things around, moving things around and separating and recreating, making human beings look and be a certain way. And I'm using the word human beings for lack of a better term, but whatever species existed. Okay, so I think that's what this is saying. So we're going to read a little bit more and then we're going to probably wrap this up. But I really just wanted to start to introduce Tehom and get some background information. The goddess creatrix that Yahweh displaced was a goddess of the moon, and so of fertility and water. Her fertility involved more than protoplasmic multiplication. It involved the entire cosmic creation and all of life, as well as psychic rebirth. The energy of the mind, imagination. The women's cultures are portrayed in these myths as a chaotic commingling, okay, of the two sexes. So let's look up this word, because what? Okay, so commingle. Oh, commingling. Okay, I did not see that like that, but commingling. Okay. So the women's cultures are portrayed in these myths as a chaotic commingling of the two sexes, of humans, animals, and vegetation, in ecstatic, spiritual, poetic animism, which messy commingling delays and obstructs the establishment of patriarchal social order. As rain pouring down into the sea delays the appearance of dry land. Under the ancient rule of water, okay, such disorder and chaos prevailed that wise men avoid all mention of it. Huh. So there was such disorder and chaos. So the female and male principles must first be decently separated and put in their places, as when the Egyptian father god Shu lifts the sky goddess Nut from her embrace with the earth god Jeb. When the Babylonian sun hero Marduk sliced Tiamat in two, he was really parting her from Apsu, god of the upper waters. Tiamat, the formidable Babylonian mother goddess, was the model for the Hebrew Tehomet. Huh. Tiamat was mother of the deep who fashioned all things. She displayed herself as night, truth, and justice. Tehom Ma'at. Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of truth and justice. Tiamat gave birth to the gods. Then, in later patriarchal epic, the gods rebel against her, and she is finally conquered by the sun god hero Marduk, who had been promised supremacy over the other gods if he did so. I'm curious by whom? Who promised him supremacy if he was able to kill Tiamat? He slays her in her form of the great whale dragon or cosmic serpent. She then surrenders her own body as building material for the universe. Note that in the original matriarchal creation myths, the Great Mother also sacrifices her body herself voluntarily to create the world from her substance. In patriarchal myth, the basic idea is maintained, but the mother body is not actively but passively surrendered. The Father God world is essentially created through male conquest and an act of matriarchy. When you kill your mother, matriarchy, that's what that means, right? Let's look it up. Yes. This is what Elizabeth Gold Davis has to say about Tiamat. In Sumerian myth, the creator goddess Tiamat appeared out of the waves of the Erythraean Sea, the Persian Gulf, as a fish woman and taught men the arts of life, to construct cities, to found temples, to compile laws. In short, instructed them in all things that tend to soften and humanize life. From that time, so universal were her instructions that nothing had to be added. Davis believes Tiamat may have been a matriarchal queen of the Thracian and Anatolian remnants of the ancient lost civilization of Atlantis. Okay, so this is another author she's mentioning here, someone named Davis. Okay, that she might have sailed down the Euphrates River from Thrace and Anatolia, perhaps circa 9000 BC, in a ship whose figurehead was a mermaid-like creature of many ancient legends, half fish and half woman, because myth was both a historical record and a psychic gestalt of universal symbols. The line between historic literalism and mythic symbolic interpretation is often blurry, and that's what makes archaeological and linguistic evidence important. Most New Eastern myths that have come down to us derive from a time when at least part of the matriarch's divine functions had been delegated to her male warrior consort. These myths date from 2500 to 1500 BC. The solar hero in all cultures corresponds with the establishment of patriarchal order. Hmm. Most near, I was receiving something, you guys, while reading that. Okay, so even though my mouth was reading, I was getting a whole vision. Okay, so I'm sorry. One moment. Okay. All right. Most Near Eastern myths that have come down to us derive from a time when at least part of the matriarch's divine functions had been delegated to her male warrior consort. These myths date from 2500 to 1500 BC. The solar hero in all cultures corresponds with the establishment of patriarchal order. And order everywhere means the suppression and negation of the great mother religion. The Greek sun god Apollo represents purification and renewal through the male. The sun, the sun. Okay, so let's highlight that. Bringing light, life, and spring back to the world by killing the python serpent of the mother, represented as the dragon of darkness, now exclusively dark, chaotic evil. These are our classic dragon stories. The serpent of chaos is originally and always a woman's body. As a great mother of chaos, of matter, still unformed and undifferentiated, she holds the earth like an egg in the pure energy of her coils. She represents the time before the gods, before the establishment of patriarchal hierarchies and distinctions. As the dragon of matter, the undivided one, older than the individuation of forms. Oh, so I think that I like the way she puts that right here, that this is older than the individuation of forms. So when things were one and there was a connectedness, then there was an individuation of the forms. She also signified the common flesh and blood bond of the people. This is why the snake dragon everywhere is identified with the indigenous masters of the ground, the matriarchal peasantry, who are invaded, conquered, plundered, co-opted by the dragon slayers of patriarchal history. So I find it interesting, like typically it was always slay the dragon, right? Until these newer stories started coming out, how to tame a dragon, right? Or how to train a dragon came. But in particular, in Game of Thrones, so in Game of Thrones, there's this whole bloodline that has this relationship, special relationship with dragons. And, if you watch that series, they're the Valerians and the Targaryens. And um, at the beginning of the story, Game of Thrones, it's much more in the future where they don't have many dragons left. There are no more Valerians. Actually, the Valerians are extinct by that point, I believe. Now that we have the House of Dragons series, we're seeing more about the Valerians, even though their bloodline is almost at the very end. But if you notice how the Valerians are depicted, they're depicted as people of color. And I wonder if that is to symbolize a more indigenous type of bloodline that had this association, this connection with dragons. They spoke the language of dragons. Um, Also, another thing that comes to mind is Godzilla. The first time I read this book, it made me think about Godzilla. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe Godzilla is an Asian origin, right? The original story. And they actually see Godzilla, first of all, God, right? Is in the name Godzilla. But In the newer stories, it's almost like they have this reverence for the Godzilla because the Godzilla comes out and helps them, and she lives in the deep. In one of the most recent movies, she actually has to fight. Um, I think she fights the ape, right? Which I don't remember his name, but um, doesn't she beat him? You know, the ape represents man. It represents man. I think she beats him, but then they become friends in the most recent movie because they have to team up against the I was about to say the AI, but that huge the alien, it was an alien mega monster. So I thought those stories are interesting. Another thing that I want to point out here is she basically just lays out for us the demonization of the snake and the serpent. And this entire book actually gives insight into that demonization, but it helps you start to see these older stories in a different light. Okay. So we're going to read a little bit more just to sort of finish out this idea. Okay, yeah, we'll be able to finish this entire chapter actually because we don't have that much more to read. Okay. All right. All right. All right. All right. I think we are over here. Yes, this is where we are. In Indian myth, the Indo-European sky god Indra comes from the goddess Danu and her son Virta, the two Dravidian serpent creators. Okay. Or the great cow goddess and her calf. They are described as undivided, bisexual, unawakened, sunk in deepest sleep, outstretched. Indra hurls his phallic lightning and decapitates them. This murder generates the act of creation, since in the Indo-European view of the dark, Serpentine, Danu, and Virta had withheld the waters in the mountain hollows and so hindered the world from coming into being. The Indo-European patriarchal world, that is. Okay. So this is interesting because this is yet another culture's story of a a new god showing up to slay, either decapitating or castrating, to kill the god, an existing god, in order to establish something else. Okay, so if you've been with me since the beginning of the series, I read that in the very first video of this series called The Syncretism of Gods. I talk about all of the different stories from the Ugarthic, the Sumerian, there's a Greek version, there's all these different versions of a new god showing up on the scene, in some cases, a descendant turning around to slay or kill a father, or usually it's a father figure. They depict it in the myths as being a father figure. Um, but what we're seeing here is that this figure was not just a father figure, it was more of an androgynous figure where it was a unified energy, bisexual, a two, a dual, a combo type situation. All right. Tehom, comma, Tiamat, Apsu, comma, Denu, Verta, were obviously names for the magnetic serpentine spirit of the earth and its underground waters, the bisexual power who was absolute mistress of all chaos before creation. His sacrifice then enables patriarchal creation, i.e., law and order, to appear. It is the custom in India before a single stone is laid in the foundation of a sacred building for the local astrologer to determine the exact spot of ground which is situated above the head of the snake that supports the world. Wow, this is custom in India. I'm going to highlight that because I would like to look that up um, to see some references and see that in context. She says it's still happening. Okay. Construction rites begin with an imitation of Indra smiting the serpent Danuverta in his or her lair. A wooden peg is driven into this spot to securely peg down the serpent's head. It is said in the Rig Veda 2, 12:1, if this snake should ever shake its head violently, it would shake the world to pieces. So with patriarchy, it is the death of the world snake that supports male world building. But patriarchy needs the serpent energy, which is the subterranean energy that powers all life. Now, I want to speak on something because I just remembered something. Something about the Vatican having a serpent snake underneath. So I'm going to look that up and I'm going to include that as well because that is an example of where this is happening. Yikes. Everyone knows the serpent is not really dead, but repressed, and this paranoid patriarchal obsession with law and order is the necessary mechanism of this repression. This worldwide attack and conquest of the cosmic serpent is called in patriarchal story the victory over the waters, through which emerged stable forms and the organization of the world. That is the male political world. The rock of Jerusalem reached deep into the subterranean waters. Tehom, it was said. The Jerusalem temple is situated directly above her, its holy rock containing the mouth of Tehom. Babylon was built above the gate of Apsu. The serpent waters before creation, Apsu, the other half of Tiamat. Wow. Everywhere, this mythic rite of building the holy male city on the conquered body of the mother serpent is enacted as the origin of patriarchy. The sun worshiping pharaohs of later Egypt slay the dragon Apopos. Apollo slays Gaia's python. The Greek hero Perseus slays the Amazonian Medusa, who is described as three-headed, the triple goddess, with snakes writhing from her three heads. St. George slays the dragon in England. Even St. Patrick must drive the snake from snakeless Ireland. And in Hebrew Genesis, the serpent is doomed by the war of God, Yahweh, to be forever the enemy of the human race, to be crushed under our heels, and to give back to us only poison. In Christian prophecy, in Revelation 12 through 21:1, so I wonder if that means, because I'm used to seeing the chapter first, so I wonder if this is chapter 1, verse 12 through 21. I don't know. The final extinction of the dragon is promised when a king Messiah kills the watery cosmic snake and then takes over the world throne unchallenged. And there was no more sea. This event is prefigured in Psalm 74:13. Thou breakest the heads of dragons in the water. The consistency of all these myths is commensurate with their reality. Oh. To the ancients, the cosmic serpent, the spirit of earth and water, was everywhere known as the energy source of life, of healing, oracular powers, fertility, and maternal blessing. This energy spirit with emerging patriarchy was redefined as the dangerous enemy, to be reviled, defeated, and destroyed. Then it was said by the new holy men that chaos has been ordered and the serpent force has been mastered. And what was to be the new source of the world energy? Slave labor, military force, the rule of the fist, threats of punishment and coercion by fire breathing, guilt-mongering male priesthoods in service to the god of war and wealth. In Babylon, the combat between the god hero Marduk and the great sea dragon Tiamat was ceremonially reenacted every new year. Marduk's victory was celebrated by the priests as an end to chaos and darkness. Marduk creates the cosmos again from the formed fragments of Tiamat's body, and he creates man from the blood of the demon Kingu, to whom Tiamat had entrusted the tablets of destiny. May he continue to conquer Tiamat and shorten her days, exclaimed the celebrants. The cosmic combat, the hero's victory, and the new creation were imagined to take place at the same moment every year. The chaos and darkness conquered by Marduk had clear social class implications. In Mircea Eliade's words, the slain body of Tiamat symbolized universal confusion, the abolition of order and hierarchy, orgy, chaos. According to the 4th century BC historian Berosus of Babylon, where Tiamat prevailed, the slaves become the masters, and all power of rank was abolished. Okay, so let's look up this source. The myth of eternal return, or cosmos in history. Oh, that's interesting. And this is from Princeton University Press. The myth of the eternal return. Probably the ancient moon rites were still celebrated on the last 12 days surrounding the last moonless nights of the years. These days were sacred to the dark moon, full of oracular power before the birth of the new year's new moon. And these last days were described as pre-creation chaos. The laws of time were suspended. Hecate roamed the black countryside. The dead rose up and came to the living in hope of new birth. Orgiastic rites were held. Then, with the appearance of the new moon, the recreation of the world magically occurred. New fires were lit. The earth and her cycles were reaffirmed. First fruit ceremonies took place, and the people sought prevention of sorrows and diseases for the coming year. The god hero New Year celebrations were simply overlaid on these ancient rites. In the most ancient times, goddess shrines were in groves, by sacred wells, in caves, and on mountaintops. During the megalithic, large stone chambers were built over blind springs. Wow. And the builders consulted astronomical and earth forces to understand their ever-changing currents. With the building of huge cities and enormous solar temples, architects were attempting to fix and permanently control the flow of the earth current. OMG. That's crazy. That's going to be another rabbit hole that I want to go down, because I have been talking about I've mentioned that it came across, I don't even know what video right now, but it has come up before, because water is a current, right? And if she is the water, if she's in the water, of course, there were things that were set up at these sacred points all over the world. But if they go and they build their structures on top of them, they basically can siphon the energy or control it, right? Subdue it or direct it. Okay, so yeah, that's definitely a rabbit hole to go into. All right, so I gotta actually rabbit hole. All right, let's wrap this up. In Babylon and Egypt, patriarchy built vast, rigid monuments to the god kings in urban centers where excess grain and other products extracted from the countryside and taxes were piled up to the greatest power and glory of the ruling priesthoods, no longer sensitive to the earth's spiritual energies. These priesthoods were no longer themselves channels of real cosmic and terrestrial power. Instead, they resorted to conscious, deliberate manipulations of human fears, and more frantic invocations and bloody mass sacrifices to no avail. The real spirit was wandering elsewhere. But the buildings became more grandiose, imposing, and expensive. One thing the patriarchal orders of all times and places have in common: huge and square cut blocks of stone that no longer have spiritual resonance or healing power for the human psyche. The cosmic serpent no longer lives in these stones. These rock metropolises, Iron Age, or modern, only secular ambition lives there. The ancients warn that attempts to direct and fix the earth force for selfish gain are doomed. Earth energies artificially trapped to serve the special interests of the ruling class of men create the tension field, the anxiety grid of modern life. Okay, so I need to read that again. The ancients warned that attempts to direct and fix the earth force for selfish gain are doomed. Earth energies, artificially trapped to serve the special interests of the ruling class of men, create the tension field, the anxiety grid of modern life. Like a fault stress in the earth or a great serpent underground, something seems about to recoil and unleash terrific energy. The spirit will always break loose and take its own path once again. And that was the chapter called The Sun's Victory Over the Dark Mother. It tells the story of what happened. It explains Tehom, which is the Hebrew sort of mirror of Tiamat, which Tiamat is from Babylon. But it tells us where she fits into this in the Bible, as far as the Bible is concerned. To home. And also we had the reference to Inanna, the Queen of Heaven. So again, Inanna is the Sumerian version of Asherah. Asherah is the Hebrew version of that Queen of Heaven, considered the consort of El. And so that's our reading for today. I will be including some connections down in the description. So make sure you check on those. Don't forget to leave me your questions, guys. Leave your comments, leave your questions, like the video, subscribe to my channel. Tell me which rabbit hole you want to go down next. And I'm excited. I hope you guys are too, to learn new information, make new connections, but ultimately reveal and uncover more of the truth. Until next time, and I wish I was doing this full camera. Until next time, I will see you then.